Diddy's ex-girlfriend and recording artist Cassie Ventura says, "I still have nightmares and flashbacks on a regular, everyday basis." Hello and welcome back to Fame Under Fire from BBC Sounds with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Hip-hop mogul Shaun Diddy Combs is being sentenced tomorrow. The prosecution have filed a 164-page sentencing submission report with victim impact letters. As always, if you've got questions, send them to me on social media or WhatsApp at +44 330 678 1114. That's +44 330 678 1114. Now don't forget to subscribe to the BBC Sounds YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. Just a warning before we begin, this programme contains sexual content and references to suicide. Now, if you're a regular listener, you'll probably know that tomorrow sentencing starts for Shaun Diddy Combs in New York on prostitution-related charges. Federal prosecutors want the judge to sentence him to more than 11 years in prison with a $500,000 fine. Last week, his defense team called for a 14-month jail term, which, with time already served, would mean he could walk free almost immediately. Joining me now from our New York office is the digital reporter Sakshi Venkatraman. Hi, Sakshi.
Hi, Anoushka. Thanks for having me back.
So we've got this sentencing memorandum written by the prosecution. We covered on the pod last week, we covered what the defense had to say, and they attached 65 character support letters to talk about Diddy being a good guy. We have letters from the children, we have letters from his mother, we have letters from people he's worked with. "My name is Carisha Brownlee. I can only speak from my personal experience and the man I've come to know over the past 4 years." So she then goes on to say, "I've also witnessed him doing real inner work. He made the choice to check himself into anger management, start therapy, and commit to physical healing through therapy. That takes strength, humility, and self-awareness. He didn't do it for show. He did it because he wanted to grow and to become a better person. In my personal experience, Shaun is not a danger or a threat to the community." We have here from the prosecution some victim impact letters, some victim letters. One of them is from Cassie. Now, we haven't really heard from her since she was actually on the stand. So actually, what does she have to say in this letter?
Yeah, so Cassie basically expresses that she is scared for her life, for her safety and her family's safety. The main takeaway that I got from it is that she thinks that if Diddy is promptly released, one of his first acts is going to be to send people after Cassie and the other victims that spoke about, their allegations against him. She says that for this reason, she's moved her family out of New York entirely. She also paints a picture of a very different man than in the support letters we saw from the defense. She says that he's unrepentant, he hasn't changed, and she doesn't believe anything the defense says about him changing. She also gave some reflections about the trial as a whole and how the jury failed to see her truth in acquitting him on sex trafficking charges and racketeering charges. We can get more into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. We have a reflection from her, what it was like. I mean, she was extremely pregnant. She says, "For 4 days in May, while 9 months pregnant with my son, I testified in front of a packed courtroom about the most traumatic and horrifying chapter in my life. I testified from the age of 19. Shaun Combs used violence, threats, substances, and control over my career to trap me in over a decade of abuse." Now, the jury did not convict Diddy of sex trafficking. They did not convict him of RICO. It's that transportation for prostitution, and the sexual acts are these freak-offs. Can you just remind everybody what the freak-offs were?
The main part of her testimony concerned these freak-offs were these drug-fueled, days-long sex parties where Cassie says that she was essentially coerced by Shaun Combs to perform with a male escort, to have sex with escorts that she didn't know, was meeting for the first time on some occasions. He would coerce her into taking drugs so that she could stay awake or that she would be more docile and compliant. And she would have to wear high heels, cover herself in baby oils, and stay in certain positions for hours on end. She says these were traumatic instances, some of the most horrifying encounters of her life. And, she talks about them again in depth in this letter.
And one of the things that the defense are saying, and we've heard from the defense, is that we heard this throughout the trial, really. There was a mutually toxic relationship. And certainly in closing statements, one of the most impactful things, I know we spoke about this a lot from Mark Agniflo's closing statement, was that the sexual appetite for these freak-offs came not just from Diddy, but also from Cassie. Cassie was a, quote, woman who enjoyed sex. And that's a large part of what we know they're going to argue. She was organizing them. She was reaching out to these guys. She was buying the outfits. She was putting herself through those beauty regimes to look how he wanted her to look for the freak-offs. But in the letter, She says, I testified that I learned to read Shaun Combs's signals, knowing that when he spoke of freak-offs, he was demanding them. Just talk to me a little bit more about what she says about his control over her in this letter.
Right. I mean, I think that what she's saying is that his control over her went so far that he didn't even need to, verbally force her. She was at the point where she was preempting his needs in order to avoid abuse and doing what she thought that he wanted to do and saying what she thought he wanted to hear. And that there was no consent in this cycle of abuse, just her trying to make sure that she wasn't going to be the victim of another violent incident.
And she says, during my time with Combs, I was in a constant state of hypervigilance as I was always anticipating demands for sex acts or otherwise fearing retribution for any perceived slight. So she's chipping away there at what the defense is going to present is that she was an active participant in this. She talks about that 2016 footage that we watched. I don't even know how many times we watched her get assaulted in the hallway of a hotel in 2016. She says, people watched this footage dozens of times, seeing my body thrown to the ground, my hands over my head, curled in a fetal position to shield me from the worst blows. This physical violence caused bruises that makeup artists paid for by Shaun Combs would cover up, as well as permanent scars all over my body. So in many ways, this is a rehashing of a lot of her testimony. But one of the main things that the defense have said is, yes, he was violent. There was domestic violence in this relationship. They admitted that throughout trial. It was a heavy, heavy feature of the closing arguments. If we were here for domestic violence, he would have said he's guilty and put his hands up. They present it as something that happened in the past and something that he has worked on himself to move through. But Cassie, in this letter, talks about the very real world impacts that she's still having to go through. Tell me a little bit about what she says this is doing to her day-to-day life now.
She talked on the stand about suicide attempts that she had in the past because of the trauma that she says she had been through. She describes still experiencing, the psychological impacts of going through this alleged abuse has on a person. So she says she's still reeling from testifying in the trial and just reeling from the cycle of alleged abuse in general.
Yeah, I think this particular line is quite impactful. I'm slowly learning how to live my life free of the fear and horrors I endured, and in doing so, I'm fully devoted to my husband and my children. So it makes it a very much, this is something that's still going on, rather than what we heard in, for instance, Gina's letter, which the defense included. Gina, who never took the stand, but was included as a victim in the first in indictments from the prosecution. She said, I believe Diddy is a good man, and this is stuff that happened in the past. We had a toxic relationship. We worked through it. He's a father. He's a loving person. He's devoted to his family. In Cassie's letter, she says, I still have nightmares and flashbacks on a regular, everyday basis and continue to require psychological care to cope with my past. You mentioned there one of the most impactful moments of Cassie's testimony was when she spoke about having these flashbacks and what it drove her to do.
Yeah, one of the points when the overflow room was completely silent was when Cassie was talking about being mentally tormented by, flashbacks, nightmares, reminders of what she says happened to her. She says if it wasn't for her loved ones stopping her and getting her into rehab, then she doesn't know where she would be.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, people were crying in the room. People were crying in the elevators. She talks about coming back from a music video shoot that she wasn't at with. Shaun Combs had nothing to do with Diddy, having those flashbacks. Her husband, Alex Fine, has put the children to bed, and she's saying, you can do this without me, and then makes an attempt on her own life. So this reflection of that in the letter, the reference to nightmares and flashbacks, for those who followed the trial closely, you would have heard something similar before, but it brings it up right up to what she's dealing with now. We also have a letter from her parents as well. What do they have to say?
Her parents echo the concerns that I think a lot of concerned parents in this position would probably say, given the allegations that their daughter has made. They said that Shaun Combs' actions were depraved and he should get a sentence, tantamount to how depraved his actions were. Their letter was much shorter than Cassie's, but very to the point. They said that their daughter was in a relationship with this man for over a decade and he tormented her. They also were very clear to say there's no consent in a domestic abuse relationship, meaning that unlike what the defense is saying, it wasn't consensual in their perspective. None of the acts were consensual. So they're also advocating for Shaun Combs to receive as high a sentence as possible.
One of the last things that Cassie says, and I'm trying with all that I am to move on. I hope your sentencing decision reflects the strength it took for victims of Shaun Combs to come forwards. Now, we have statements from Cassie, who we would know as victim number one. Some people refer to her as the star witness, who a lot of the case was built around. We have a statement from Mia, using a pseudonym, who worked for Diddy for many years and who alleged a pattern of abuse, sexual abuse, coercion, coercive control, and at times violence. We have Capricorn Clark, Deontay Nash. These are some of the other letters that we have. We don't have Jane. Just remind everyone who Jane is.
Jane was one of the victims who took the stand talking about Shaun Combs' violence. She actually dated him up until he was arrested in September of 2024. Jane's testimony was very interesting, most notably because Diddy is still paying for her house. She says that she receives a $10,000 allowance from him every month to fund the house that she lives in with her son. And she's still tied to him in a lot of ways that Cassie and the other victims are not tied to him anymore. But she alleges a lot of the same abuse. She says that she was coerced into performing freak-offs with male escorts who she didn't know. Ultimately, she just wanted to spend time with Diddy and wanted to be with her lover, as she put it. But she says that anytime he wanted to see her, it was in the context of having a freak-off, which lasted days in various cities.
Yeah, we don't have a letter from Jane, but she's heavily referenced in the rest of the sentencing memorandum. Talks about her being violated, some of her notes that she kept about not wanting to do the freak-off. So her testimony is still in there. Now, we are going to be doing an update when we get a result on how long he's going to be sentenced for. Reminder, the defense want essentially time served, 14 months, and the prosecution are asking for 11 years. Sakshi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
That was the BBC's New York digital reporter, Sakshi Venkatraman. Joining me now is our resident trial attorney, Shaun Kent. Hi, Shaun.
Hey, Anoushka. How's everybody doing?
So if you guys remember back when we gave you the verdict of the Diddy trial, 2 months in New York, convicted of 2 counts of transportation for prostitution by the federal government, not RICO, not sex trafficking, which were the 2 big ones. Now, I believe at the time, did they come out and say, we're looking for 20 years or something? It was a large amount. Yeah, they came out and said, the prosecution came straight out, we're looking for 20 years. We know, we told you last time what the defense are asking for, essentially time served, 14 months. He's would have been in there over a year by the time we get to that October 3rd sentencing date. Now the prosecution are saying 11 years. Shaun, what's your reaction to that?
The prosecution, just because they're asking for a certain number doesn't mean they're going to get it. The defense asking for a certain number doesn't mean they're going to get it. As I've talked to you about, there's something called a PSR that's been happening this entire time. That's the pre-sentence report that's being done by probation. And supposedly that pre-sentence report, I would assume, has already been sent to the prosecution and the defense. Usually the prosecution's number is in line with what the probation department is asking for. So the question is, did the probation department also agree that these enhancements are necessary? And the prosecution is pretending they're bringing something out of the air, but they might know that that's the number on the pre-sentence report.
When we spoke about the PSR before, you talked about certain things that they take into account. So no previous criminal record, for instance, which automatically lowers the amount of time, which he doesn't have a previous criminal record, lowers the amount of time he could spend behind bars. Now, you just mentioned there's something called enhancements. Can you explain what that is?
For anybody who has ever gone to a nail salon and just get your nails done, and all of a sudden they're just like, do you want gel coat? Do you want this? Do you want those? You know, you go in there for your base price on your nails, but if you get gel coat, everything costs a little bit more money. It's the same thing in the federal system. You go in there with your base charge, and the federal government, the probation department, has decided to sprinkle some enhancements on it based upon other things that they think he has done. And every enhancement adds more time to your potential sentence. What we do in the federal system is, it's not just the crime that you have committed, it is your conduct and the way that you have behaved that should determine how much time you're actually getting. And so an enhancement can be your role, meaning you're the type of individual who beat somebody up, but you're also the leader of the organization that caused someone to be beaten up. Maybe beating up somebody carries 4 years, but because you're the leader of this organization, you get an additional 2 years. We're trying to get you more, and that's enhancement because you're not just somebody who's a mere participant, you're a leader. Maybe there's other victims based upon the awful, abhorrent stuff that you have done. We're going to add 2 more levels. So you see what's happening, Anoushka, is every time the government or the probation department can look at your case and say, Judge, we understand that his base is only carrying this amount of time, but because of all of the awful stuff he has done, the statute, the sentencing guidelines allows us to enhance his sentence, and that's how we get to the 11 years.
If we remember what the defense was saying, he's a user of prostitutes, not a pimp, not an organizer. He's what's called a John, and it's unprecedented to go after a user of prostitutes like this. Typically, there's an unwritten rule that you go after the person running the show, not the person buying the goods, for lack of a better phrase. But if you want to understand succinctly what the prosecution are basically saying, it says, the defendant is not a, quote, John who casually consumed commercial sex. Rather, as discussed above, his conduct, including exploiting and controlling women through tactics including manipulation, threats, fear, controlled substances, and physical violence, more closely resembles that of a pimp. So that, I think, down to a T is their argument, and it's very, very long, and the word violent and violence comes up 274 times. So there is a heavy focus on the violence in the relationship with Cassie and Jane and Mia, which they owned up to consistently throughout the trial, and people saying that at the end it's kind of bitten them in the backside when it came round.
The same way that I said I thought the defense's motion was very good, I think the prosecution is good because they basically took the language from the defense and are using it against Diddy now and just saying all the stuff you admitted to get acquitted, we are now using against you as relevant conduct to show the character of who you are. You are a violent person. You've admitted to abusing people. You have admitted to all of these situations. And for that reason, we're going to try to get you much more time.
And guys, we are going to have a bonus episode when we find out how long he is going to be spending behind bars, or if indeed he's going to walk straight out that courtroom. We will be here with it first and let you know, just as we were throughout the entire trial.
This could happen to any woman, and it is happening to 1 in 5 women, and that's really scary. I was hacked, stalked, harassed, and impersonated. It was a period of absolute hell for me. The story kicks off at a very glamorous London Fashion Week setting. I was getting the coffee.
But you were hanging out in this very, very glamorous kind of environment, right?
Yeah, I was living the dream. I was clueless and innocent, and it was in this very glamorous London Fashion Week setting where I was an intern having the time of my life that I met a man who is actually at the center of this story.
Now, it's an episode of Last Minute Updates because next we're bringing you news about a letter we've just received from Candace Owens' husband. But before I get into the letter, here's a little mini outline of where we're at so far with the Macrons versus Candace Owens case. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, and his wife, Brigitte, are suing right-wing influencer and podcaster Candace Owens for defamation. Candace Owens has been posting videos claiming Brigitte Macron was born a man and is actually her brother. The Macrons categorically deny the claims, calling them outlandish, defamatory, and far-fetched fictions. And on this podcast, we exclusively broke the news that the French president and his wife will and are resolved to prove in court that Brigitte is female. Since then, Candace Owens responded, and in our latest episode, we fact-checked some of those claims. Go and check it out if you haven't. Now, today, we have received a letter. It's addressed to the US National Security Division for the attention of the FARA unit chief, and it's from Candace's husband, the British-American businessman, George Farmer. The letter claims the Macrons are breaking federal law by hiring investigators, publicists, and others to work on his behalf in the United States without registering under FARA. FARA, I'll go with FARA. I think that's what it is. FARA is the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Shaun Kent, our resident trial attorney, is back with me to quickly run through this allegation. Hi, Shaun.
Thank you, Anoushka. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so my understanding of that then is if you are a foreign agent, say Keir Starmer wanted to pitch up in the US and do some stuff, that involved his reputation, business, anything like that, he would have to register who was working for him there and helping him do so inside the territory of the United States of America?
This thing passed in 1938, so you know what's going on in the world. People are suspicious on what's going on in other countries. And if we're trying to get some political divisiveness, if people are trying to come over to the United States to try to influence politics, influence what's going on, so that's why it was created. It's basically a knowledge requirement. We want to make sure you're not trying to come over here and influence what's going on in America without telling us your purpose. Let us know. Show yourself. Show us what you're doing in America. Don't just come over here and pretend you're doing something without telling us who you're actually working for.
Okay, so look, let's go to what it says in the letter. It says President Macron is indeed entitled to challenge his critics, and notwithstanding any jurisdictional and forum issues, he is even entitled to file defamation lawsuits against American journalists for asking uncomfortable questions pertaining to the person identifying as his wife. But Mr. Macron may not violate federal law in the process. Now, it goes on to say that since at least January of 2025, the sitting president of France has waged an influence campaign against Ms. Owens in the United States aimed at damaging Ms. Owens' reputation and deterring her from reporting. Now, and it goes on to say this bit, but in bold, it is readily understood by everyone that sitting presidents of foreign nations are foreign principles. Shaun, what does that mean? And how does that impact what the FARA law applies to?
Well, and that's what they're saying, that the French president is trying to influence what the people of the United States think of him. He is a foreign principal, so he would be covered under FARA, F-A-R-A. Now, why does he have investigators doing anything in the United States? And why aren't these investigators registered? And why aren't these investigators telling the United States people why they're here investigating? That's what they're saying. So they have a point, but I don't understand where we're going with this.
But the letter highlights, it goes on to say, like, quote, it is a felony to willfully violate FARA. Civil fines can be as high as $250,000, and failure to register when required to do so is punishable by up to 5 years imprisonment and hefty fines. Is this accurate? Could the investigators working for Macrons face punishments like that?
Yeah, I mean, the law is what the law is. This is absolutely true, but make sure you understand, this is not the situation that would cause for the 5-year, $250,000 penalty. If you go through our history and look at what's talking about in 1938, we're talking about Soviet spies coming over and spying on the United States type stuff. We're talking about espionage. We're talking about things of this nature. We are not talking about an investigator looking into a defamation lawsuit because somebody said that his wife has a penis. Okay, we're not getting into that level of what's going on. And don't forget, even if everything they say in this letter is correct, the lawsuit doesn't go away. It has nothing to do with the lawsuit.
But the investigators, they're already there. It's an American firm. They've got offices in the U.S.
As we read this, FARA provides the United States government and the public with public disclosures from foreign agents. And so what they're saying is they're acting on behalf of the French president. So he is a foreign agent, allowing them to make informed evaluation of foreign influence. And so remember, the whole point of FARA and what they're missing and what they're trying to say is somehow the French president is trying to influence the American people. And when you bring it down to it, it's a lawsuit. It has nothing to do with the American people. He's saying, this is about you, Candace. This has nothing to do with the American people. This is about stuff you have said about me, and I'm bringing my lawsuit.
But does it apply if she's saying it's about influencing or removing my First Amendment rights? First Amendment is, if we need a refresher, part of the United States Constitution Bill of Rights that prevents the government from restricting certain freedoms: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peacefully assemble, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. She's saying that those rights are being attacked, suppressed by the Macrons. Is that enough to trigger this?
I'm going to read this directly to you about FARA. The law helps identify threats to national security, okay? Not Candace. National security by revealing who is attempting to influence American policy, perceptions, or laws on behalf of foreign interests. This is not about a personal individual, Candace Owens. Candace can make an argument that you trying to silence me because I have millions of followers is trying to silence what the American people are getting to hear about the people of France. And that's what you're trying to do. That's the stretch and the connection they have to make.
Yes, but that's the connection that the Macrons made. They said she's so influential. This message is getting out there so widely, so many people are believing this, that it does impact the American perception of the French president and his wife.
And that's what I'm saying. It's interesting. Like, it really, this FAR argument is interesting, but it doesn't affect the lawsuit.
But if they went, my bad, let's register. Do we just carry on? My bad, guys. We'll just register under FAR and crack on.
And that's what I'm telling you, Anoushka. If it comes down in your worst case scenario, let's go our worst case scenario, which I don't see happening. Let's see the DOJ, Department of Justice, looks at this, reads this letter, investigates it. They say, France president, you have been sending people in here. You have violated our statute. We're upset with you. Here is a 5-year felony charging as every investigator who has come over here, and here's a $250,000 fine. By the way, discovery starts on your lawsuit tomorrow. It doesn't stop the lawsuit.
Does it negate the investigations they've already done?
That is a phenomenally great question. We have something in the law called fruit of the poisonous tree. And what that means is if you got something and you got it in a way that you weren't allowed to get it, all of the fruit that comes from the tree is also illegal. And so if an argument can be made that you shouldn't have been over here to get this stuff to begin with from this illegal tree, everything you've gotten as a result of it can be thrown out. So that would be an argument that they could make, that potentially because they violated FAR, shouldn't be doing an investigation, shouldn't have gotten anything, it should be thrown out. That's an argument. That's a great question. Do I think it's going to happen? No. But it's a great question and a great argument.
Okay, one last thing. We're using the term investigation, and of course they are a corporate investigations firm, Nardello, Dan Nardello being the CEO. But what he was using was publicly available information. I mean, a large chunk of what he was doing was going through the podcast, detailing what she said, when she said it, how it's defamatory, etc. When she changed her line, she said this on Piers Morgan, she said this on the podcast. She appeared, she had this connection with this person in France, and we know this because there's this tweet, there's this video. So if it's all publicly available stuff and they haven't conducted an investigation, as in I'm searching through your trash and I'm looking at your email search history, then is it really an investigation or is it a browsing of readily available stuff?
You hit the nail on the head. That's why I don't see this going anywhere. I could be wrong. I don't see this going anywhere. As I mentioned, it's a bit of a stretch. It might be their salvo back to fight back, to make the Macrons spend more money on costs, but you're exactly right. Everything that they have done, they could have done over in France. They don't have to come to America to do these things.
What's the point of this?
I mean,
what's the strategy?
You want my assumption? Look who signed the letter.
Mr. Candace Owens.
And so think about it. At some point in time, hubby's just like, I got you, girl. I'll handle this. I know.
Let me tell you something. First of all, he's English, so try that again.
All right, well, maybe he's a tip up, mind the gap. I said mind the gap.
Yeah, guys, all those years of empire and the only cultural remnants we have in Shaun's mind is Paddington Bear, Mind the Gap, and Benny Hill for some reason.
And Doctor Who. You forgot Doctor Who.
I mean, interesting. We'll see where this goes. Why wasn't this in the motion to dismiss? I don't know. Is that? Can you file this kind of stuff in the motion to dismiss?
I mean, I've said it 3 times, but think about it. The reason it's not in the motion to dismiss is it doesn't have anything to do with the lawsuit.
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see. There
I mean, we could be wrong, but I mean, it's interesting. But that's what we do. We find obscure laws and we fight based upon them, and we do a little bit of challenges. And this is also a potential letter where they actually, if you read the first couple of paragraphs, it might also be this simple. We want the world to know that we asked them to come and do blank and they refused. It might just be a way that we can get our story out. It might be like, look, let us tell you again my side of the story.
Shaun, thank you so much for doing this in person, live research, live lawyering.
Research.
Period. That's why we pay you the big bucks.
The big bucks. I'm going to buy some, bangers and mash. Isn't that a thing? I'm going to buy that.
Yes, bangers and mash is a thing.
See?
I'm not going to engage you with on English food because you're so insulting.
Yeah.
And it hurts. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Much appreciated.
That was our resident trial attorney, Shaun Kent, joining us from South Carolina. Now, don't forget, you can get in touch with us on WhatsApp at +44 330 678 114. Let us know your questions or thoughts on who we should be covering or talking about next. That's it for this episode of Fame Under Fire from BBC Sounds with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Make sure you subscribe to the BBC Sounds YouTube channel so you never miss an episode.